Hello, and welcome everyone to today's panel discussion about how legal can successfully partner with sales. My name is Melissa with Lawtrades. In case you aren't familiar with us, we allow busy GCs to do more with less by finding flexible remote work or remote talent to work with them. The reason we're doing this topic today, I think, is pretty obvious to everyone that has joined the call. At some point, we've all had an interaction with the sales team that has brought a challenge to mind. So we're here to discuss that and figure out ways that we can all successfully move forward. We have an amazing panel today, and I'm excited to introduce them to you. I'll quickly pass it off so everyone can introduce themselves. Sophie, I'll turn it over to you first.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Hi, everyone. My name is Sophie. I am the head of legal for UK and Ireland at Wework, based in London. Have been working at the company coming up to 5 years. So being here for all of the ups and downs that we've seen through Wework and working through our success story. So that's a bit about me.
Claire, you can jump in.
Yeah, so I'm Claire. Hi, everybody. I'm General Counsel at Huel. So I've been at Huel since March this year. Before that, I was at Brompton Bikes. So I've been in a range of kind of high growth companies. I'm sole counsel at Huel, so I am both the top dog and the bottom dog, which is always fun.
And Walter.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Walter Thomas. I am the General Counsel at Storm Technologies. I have, for my sins, been in-house now for almost 25 years, most of that working with sales in the technology and software licensing and sales field. Storm is a small business. It's family owned. We only have about 250 people. So I've come from a place where I managed a team of 28. Previously back down to being the chief cook and bottle washer here at Storm. So I look forward to speaking with everyone today.
Wonderful. We've got a great panel with a lot of experience to talk on this topic. I want to kick it off by talking about how you can create successful communications between departments. How do you do it? In particular, how do you work with your sales team when maybe previously they've only worked with outside counsel and haven't worked directly with an in-house legal person prior to you joining the team? Sophie, I'll kick it off to you first.
Cool. I think when we're speaking about building communications and getting on the same wavelength between the legal team and the sales team when working in-house, it's important to know who is your client, as in who is the sales team. I, in my role, work with a range of different members of the sales team, from very experienced folks to ones who are kind of just starting their career and really eager to make an impression and have a lot to learn. So I think the first step in kind of making sure that you're all on the same page and they know that you want to achieve the same goals as them is to really relate to them on the level that they're at and work with them to bring them up to potentially a level that you need them to be at when you're working with them from a legal perspective. I think with communication, we have so many different pathways to speak to anyone now, especially post-COVID. We have Zoom calls, we have emails, we have Slack, we have WhatsApp, we have all of these different areas and mechanisms to speak to everyone, that it's important to figure out how can you use that to your advantage and what works best in your company and with your particular client. So I find that in-person meetings where possible, best way forward, get on the same page, be a real person and not just a voice that they're hearing over a video call or a phone call or an email. Reduce the amount of mixed messages, interpretation, and so on. I think we've all been in a position where you read something one way and it wasn't meant that way. So really make the effort to get to know people, see them in person, know that you're there to support them, and also build respect between both sales and legal, both ways. I think if you work with a law firm versus like an in-house counsel, we're trying to achieve the same thing and we're working as a team. And it's less about providing instructions and more about obtaining advice and getting, legal's take on a negotiation, or like ideas and brainstorming and how can we best get from A to B in a commercial way, rather than I'm instructing you to do X, Y, Z. And I think a big part of that is building a really successful relationship with respect, and hopefully that works well.
I think building those relationships can help, whether it's sales or anyone else within the company as well. Claire, what's your experience been there?
So I think in the types of companies that I've kind of worked at most recently, they've both been, Huel's really high growth, Brompton's the same. And so I'm quite often the first lawyer that people have come across directly. And I think there's a bit of a stigma attached with being the lawyer that, that you're going to say no, that you're not going to be approachable, that you're going to be a bit high and mighty. So I really spend most of my time helping people to recognize that actually I'm just like them. I'm just, I am approachable, involve me in stuff. I can be commercial. My default position is not to start with no. I try my absolute hardest to start with a at worst maybe, but hopefully with a yes. And I think it's really just about, I really try and make it a seamless approach, so that we have chats, they don't have to schedule appointments. It's just, those water cooler moments, which are harder to have now. Many of us work remotely for some of the time at least. But ultimately, it's about being approachable. The other thing that I try and do with our sales team is, and this is partly because we're really lean as a legal function, is to empower them as much as possible, so that it's not just, legal isn't just this completely unknown quantity to them that is just a pain in the backside and delays them from signing their next deal. It's, they understand it and we empower them, and they kind of really buy into it and why we're concerned, so that we kind of do a lot of training and really make them as self-sufficient as possible, obviously within limits. But yeah, it's about, I think it's, as Sophie said, it's about the integration and relationships as much as possible. Yeah. Absolutely.
And Walter, what's your take?
Well, I agree with both of those points. And I think that the key really, as a lawyer coming in-house, is to reevaluate the way you look at the issues that are brought to you, particularly by sales. We are taught to look at risk and problems rather than commercial opportunities. We are taught, generally speaking, by the Socratic method and to be aggressive in the way we deal with people. And I think that you have to set that aside and relearn how to interact with your sales colleagues. You need to, as a lawyer, not be a lawyer. You need to be a part of the business. And what I mean by that is you need to understand your business. You need to know the business of the business. You need to know what your sales force is selling and how they're selling it, and what the strong points and the weak points of your product offering are. If you know all of that and you leave the Latin at home because they won't understand what you're talking about, and you speak in plain English and you become a part of their team, they will eventually see you as someone they can communicate with, someone who they can bring issues to early, and someone who actually helps them get the deal done and get their commission at the end of the day. And I think that is the way, as an in-house counsel, we have to focus on our relationship and building it with the sales and services elements of the business. We have to assist the business in getting business. We can't focus on problems, can't focus on risk. We have to focus on the opportunities and mitigate the problems and the risk. And I was at a conference quite recently, and if you're new in-house, I was at this conference recently in London, and the general counsel of Lyme stood up and said, when you come in-house and you're trying to do everything all at once, you can really burn yourself up. And when you focus on minutiae, like we as lawyers are trained to do, and you slow down the sales process, because you're really focused on being exact, like we were trained to be, not to make mistakes, you begin to look like a roadblock to your salespeople. And what she said, what the general counsel of Lyme said was, think about it this way. Your best effort as a lawyer, not the greatest effort you can put forward, but you're just being there and participating in the discussion is going to benefit your business, particularly if you're the first lawyer that's ever come in-house. You don't want to be seen as sales prevention. You want to be seen as enablement. And it's all about speaking the language of your salespeople, mitigating the risk for your business, but allowing the opportunities. Business is all about risk. We can't stop it all. So you shouldn't try.
Those are some very good. Oh, go ahead, Claire.
I was just going to add something in here, and it really resonates actually from Walter, what Walter was saying. I think that we do have a reputation as lawyers for, always wanting to be right, always having the last word, and I think it really does us a disservice. And actually, I think as Walter recognises, a little bit of curiosity goes a long way. And when you're in-house, there is nothing wrong with being curious and showing vulnerability. And to be honest, I don't think there's anything wrong with that in any legal industry, but particularly in-house, because you cannot and will not know the intricacies of every aspect of business. But you know what? The sales team will be, I find, automatically endeared to you if you take the time and you want to know and you ask them questions and you show that vulnerability of like, tell me about how this works, because I don't know, but I'm really fascinated. Like, how do your relationships work? And whilst we're talking about sales, it's like with the procurement teams, it's like, can I go? Can I see one of the factories? Can I go on a visit to logistics? Just showing that you are interested, and that vulnerability, I think, can really cement a relationship, because we don't know everything, nobody can, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Claire, you and Walter are saying. And, to go to one of the questions in the Q&A box about sales being a little bit aggressive, and how do you actually go from joining a new company where sales are in your face, they're nonstop, they're chasing, it's almost unbearable to be a part of it, which I think we can all relate to a little bit. And I think big picture, working with sales, you can't individually get every single member of the sales team to see you as an asset. And I think you need to pick carefully who in that department you can build the first relationship with, and then build it from there. So if I'm thinking head of sales for UKI, how can I meet with you? How can I benefit you? What do you need from me to succeed? Where do you see gaps? How can I help members of your team? And kind of get them as the individual leader of their sales team on my side and take it from there. Because if I have a positive relationship with the head of sales for UKI, then that's going to filter down to how their team views me and my team. And I think having that cascade out from top to bottom and throughout the business is a great starting point. But I think if you focus on trying to get every individual sales person to, from the outset, view you in a positive way and not see you as a legal bottleneck that's stopping deals and slowing things down, you need to be considerate and thoughtful when you want to build those positive relationships at the beginning.
I think that is exactly right. If you try and boil the ocean, whether it's try and make everybody happy, or whether you try and get every contract right, you're going to fail. Okay, and I think that we have to pick our battles, and we pick the battles that we can win. And one of the first and greatest victories is getting that first person on the sales team, or that first person in procurement, who realizes, goodness, we did get through this discussion. We got through it quite quickly compared to when it used to go to external counsel. and I got paid. I got my commission. When you win those hearts that way and get them talking amongst themselves, you win half the battle in the engagement with legal and sales.
That's a very, you guys have all made extremely wonderful points. And I agree, you get that one person who then can funnel down, hopefully it'll just continue to, move the needle of success upwards. When we talk about owning the business, knowing the business in and out and building those relationships, there's one story that Walter had told on an earlier call that I just thought was fascinating, coming into in a company and, getting that bottleneck of maybe it's an aggressive sales team and how you pivot away from that. But Walter, you had a very interesting story of, coming in and finding your new office. Do you want to share that? I think it's
Certainly.
really interesting.
So back in 2000, I became the first European GC and the first in-house counsel at a company called eGain Communications, they're based in Sunnyvale in California. And eGain had purchased a European business called Inference and had recently merged the two together. And the Inference company had been in the UK for going on 20 years. They'd never had a lawyer. They'd never used one. There were a few problems that they had stored up. And eGain, being an American publicly listed business, they hired me. And I was young, and I thought I had made it because I arrived at work on the first day, and I was ushered up to the C-suite in the building, and I had a beautiful office between the FD and the managing director of Europe. And on my door was a yellow sticky when I arrived, and it said Sales Prevention Department. And so I went into the FD's office and I said, do you know anything about this sticker? Did you put it on my door? Is it a joke? And he said, no, I have no idea. And I went into the MD's office and I got the same. And I said to them, I really appreciate this nice office. I said, but if I'm going to be effective and do my job, I want you to move me to one of the spare offices just off of the sales floor in the middle of everything, because if they already view me as sales prevention, I am not going to succeed here. And so I moved myself down to the sales floor. I made myself available every day. I went to lunch with them. I bought them pints of beer on Fridays, and I had to develop a relationship at the very basic level in order to gain their trust and in order to make a difference in the business. And that was my introduction to in-house life.
Quite the introduction.
Sales prevention. I've probably been called that as well plenty of times in my time at Wework.
And sometimes it's necessary. I'm not saying that there aren't times where we as in-house counsel don't have to stand up and really get involved and get in the way. That can be as useful as building the other kind of relationship with people. If you have somebody who misbehaves, if you have somebody who really endangers the business, if you have somebody who you think may, God forbid, be a criminal actor within the business, accidentally even, because that can happen, you really have to occasionally stand up and make an example of somebody. It's not pleasant, and it can set you back with your relationship with a lot of people. But in my career, I have found out that they would much prefer to see the nice guy who they can collaborate with than the old dragon I turn into when it's necessary.
I think I was just going to add there that I think the benefit of being part of their team and striving and starting at, as I said previously, starting at maybe and moving towards yes, rather than starting at no and moving to maybe and then potentially yes, is that you get so much respect for when you do have to say no, because the teams know that you are working with them and you're trying your hardest to structure their deal or structure their contract in a way that gives them the ability to say, for me to sign off and say yes. And when you come back to them and say, no, we can't do it like that, most of my time, my experience is that people listen because they know that I don't say no just because
lightly.
I can. Mm.
You know, you don't use the word no lightly when you're in-house. And I think that is, my favorite phrase is, have you thought about? You know, it's not no, it's not yes, but have you thought about, what about this? What about that? Or I didn't want to be the yes, but man, you know?
I think on that point as well, one of the things I want to be careful not to say, I saw one of the comments in the boxes is we want to help sales get paid, which is a great outcome for sales, but conscious that I would pivot that a little bit and say, like, we want to help sales close a great deal and feel excited about that deal. And instead of being like, yes, understand you need to get this signed by the end of the month to hit your target, it's more of a, or what I try and do is, this is a really great deal. Like, this is a great client. They're looking at a great space. How the way that you're structuring this in the term sheet is so interesting. Like, what is going on? Have you thought about that? Like, this is very cool and exciting. And I think the deal that you're putting together as the sales contact is impressive. And how can we close this really great deal together, rather than have sales, which obviously they want to close deals to get their commission. We want to get them excited about doing a great deal and having that kind of publicized once they close it, rather than I need a response now because I just need to get this deal closed, but have them think about the nuances of what that deal actually means and what the interesting parts of that specific deal is, and get them excited about that too.
I think the other thing that we as lawyers can be guilty of is like thinking that we only know the law. Like that's what we do. So we don't really have any, I mean, where's our authority to speak about commercial deals? But actually, you do, as a lawyer, you have such oversight and such breadth of experience of different styles of deals, different structures of deals. And actually, I find that really helps, because a lot of the people that I work with, they don't all have a vast amount of experience. And so, you know, they're incredibly strong at what they do, but they don't necessarily have that breadth just because they haven't, you know, got that many years under their belts. And so if you can say to them, there's nothing wrong with saying to them, do you know what we could do? I've seen this before. We could structure it like that. And half the time they'll say to you, oh, wow, yeah, no, that's a good idea. I haven't thought about it like that. And so I just don't think as lawyers, I think we can be guilty of pigeonholing ourselves and going, well, we can't step outside our legal box. But actually, like having that confidence to step up and say, I've seen this deal structured in this way, that might work here. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think
there's a question.
Sorry, one
more point.
Okay, to say, I think my experience at Wework over the past 5 years has been sales often paying things forward to us and say, this is for you to deal with now. And it's very much less about the legal aspects of being a lawyer when I'm working on a lot of deals. And it's more about everything that is in writing is for the lawyer to deal with. And that makes my job exciting because I'm getting experience to all these different areas that I didn't necessarily think I would have in my career from the outset. And not only am I a lawyer for the business, but now I'm also evaluating all these commercial terms. And I think when you are working with sales in-house, it's great to partner with them to talk through what in writing is actually legal that I will own completely and feed back to you. And what are things that we can work on together that are their call? Like, what decision did they want to make? And how do their decisions impact that deal once it closes? So are there operational points that they are saying, yeah, that's fine, but what does that actually mean afterwards for the company providing the product that we're signing for? And I think when you work with them and really go through the meaning of what's in the writing, you see them engage a lot more and really understand what a lawyer can help you with from commercial points to legal points, and giving them an understanding of everything.
Totally on that. I mean, like the amount of I get sent stuff and they'll be like, hi, can you have a look at this? And my first response is, yeah, sure. Are all the commercial terms correct? Because do you have a term sheet? Like, have you read the commercial terms? Are you comfortable with them? There are so many questions. And I think this goes into, I think potentially half answer some of the questions that have been raised, but I think legal can be seen as dragging the sales process along and taking time, being the blocker, all this kind of stuff. But the process, I try and get sales to help themselves as much as possible. So it's like, right, this is the information I need, almost like a triage service. This is what I need from you for me to be able to look at this contract as quickly as possible. So I do need to understand the pricing structure, the term, what you've agreed about exclusivity up front. Tell me that up front, and I can cross references and make sure that we are covered sufficiently well. But it will add an automatic delay if my first response is, what are the commercial terms? Because I've had to review the document to kind of ask what the commercial terms are, and suddenly it's a complete bottleneck. So yeah, my big tip is to try and put in place a tick box, even if you like. It can be as simple as a tick box saying this is the deal, and submit it that way.
That's really good, Claire. And actually a question that we were going to bring up, what resources are you giving the sales team to make that process a little smoother and more successful for everyone? There's a question that came up though during the last couple minutes, which I thought was really relevant. How do you deal with the salespeople that are consistently ignoring you and going around the legal team to get a deal done? Have you come across that before, and how do you navigate that?
I mean, I think this comes down to business processes as well, right? From my experience. So it's about getting the buy-in of the senior team that legal isn't a nice to have, it's an essential part of a review, but adding a level of practicality into that. So I mean, what we're looking at the moment is Huel, we're putting in a proper approvals process. So there'll be a proper written down scope of what people have to run past me or run past the legal team, and that will have, if there's key contractual terms, if we're exclusivity, if it's for a long duration, if it's of a certain value, and then getting buy-in from your C-suite that ultimately you can't circumvent legal, or putting in a process where you've got, there is an approvals matrix which says that this person can sign this agreement and only this person can sign this agreement, and that person knows that they have to have got that tick box from legal of I've checked it. But yeah, I think, Walter, you were going to say something, but I think that the buy-in from the C-suite is essential.
And I think it is absolutely essential, and you've covered about half of what I was going to say. The other thing is it depends on the business that you're in as to how much of that end run around legal you're going to see. And what I mean by that is I come from a publicly traded business background in the software industry, and I have a number of years. And there's a wonderful thing called US GAAP and revenue recognition. And because the lifeblood of a technology business, a licensing technology business, is the ability to recognize revenue off of software licensed or services provided. The devil is really in the detail in those businesses. And so I used to get sales queuing up outside my office because they didn't know if these words that were in the page that they were holding, that their customer had sent to them, was going to allow the company to recognize revenue. And so, if you're in a situation like that, you get less of an end run around you. If you're in a company that's not publicly listed or doesn't really worry about the revenue recognition rules, it can be a little more difficult. And then the buy-in of the C-suite is really, really important, because if it's key to the company that processes and procedures are followed, you will have a SOX procedure in place that requires legal to sign off, and everything will be documented down the way. But if you're not, then it can be the Wild West sometimes. It can be really quite interesting. I've seen some really, really creative ways to keep legal out of the business, right down to signing contracts and shredding them without telling anybody about it.
Walter, that's wild. I was going to say, I mean, I can speak to being both in a private and public company in the same company. And I have seen quite a huge shift in how sales now seriously take doing the deal that they're doing the right way. But I think, and maybe if the person who submitted the question about being ignored isn't quite there yet, or their sales team don't quite understand the implications to signing things without legal involvement, you know, as much as we want to build a positive relationship with sales, it works both ways. And as much as we want them to view us in a positive light and think of us as a great partner, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't call things out when we see them. And if there's a particular salesperson or a particular group who are ignoring legal advice, are not submitting, are not getting approvals that they need to, it's also your responsibility as the lawyer for the company to flag those issues with the appropriate parties, whether that means their manager or someone else, because you know that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing, and the result is likely something bad or could be something bad. And so I think there is a bit of a give and take on, yes, we want a positive relationship, we want to work with sales, but you know, we're not here to be your best friend either. We're here to protect the company, to make sure that great deals are signed that make sense. We're not agreeing to things we shouldn't be. And we're signing contracts on products and services we can actually deliver. So I think it is a bit of a balance of good cop, bad cop at the same time.
It's interesting when I've done so I've been their first in-house hire for both my current role and the role before. And I've actually ended up putting together a really brief presentation of why I'm even there, like why have an in-house counsel and what is my role. And essentially it boils down to, I believe, is I am protecting the value of the business for the shareholders. Like, that is why I'm there. I'm protecting the value of the business. And I think that really resonates to people, because sometimes I don't think people really understand why we have legal, especially if you don't have many contentious legal matters. You know, why are we, you know, it could be like, well, why does it matter? No one ever looks at these contracts ever again when they're in a bucket or whatever. We filed them. No, so why do we care what's written on there? And to educate people to kind of understand a business and its potential exit plan, and then to educate the business on you know, your stakeholders why you're there, I think is really valuable, because especially you know, at Huel, we all have share options. Everybody who is an employee has share options. So ultimately, my role is to protect the value and the potential value of the business. And if we do things correctly, we'll maximize that value. And if we don't, then we won't. And I think that can be a really kind of taking it right back to basics it can be really beneficial.
Absolutely, really good points. You know, making sure the education is there, not only in your position, but you know, across the company. And then also, you know, Claire, you had touched on giving them somewhat of a checklist to go through. Are there other resources that you guys are giving your sales team to help set them up for success and to be efficient before they even get to you?
I think there's one resource that's really important for the sales team, and that is the basic contractual documents that they're going to use to facilitate the sales of the business. And I say this and I underline it twice, because every business I've come into, particularly a European business, the European T's and C's or the European contractual documents have been created by an external law firm that doesn't know the business of the business, and they are not pertinent to the business of the business, and they are full of stuff that is so one-sided that it puts every contractual negotiation on an extremely contentious basis. And I think that to arm your salespeople with a set of reasonable T's and C's that are easy to read, organized, and easy to understand, gets them signed on the other side of the more often than negotiated. And I'll give you an example. This year, in the first 6 months of 2022, we brought on 225 new customers here at Storm Technologies, and that's in the first 6 months. Of those 225, we negotiated 25 agreements and we signed 225. And when I say this, and I can't say it enough, the agreement has got to fit the company, it's got to fit the product set, and it cannot be ridiculously drafted in a one-sided way.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things, and I think I benefit from having a bit of a larger legal team at Wework. We are globally just over 100 lawyers, and we do a lot of our drafting in-house, and we at least twice a year review and update the contracts based on feedback we've received over that year from clients that we agree with and points that we don't feel comfortable speaking to. Or if you know in a negotiation, if someone raises a point and you're going to give it, then why don't we start in that position if we think it's fair? Mm-hmm. And I think that works to a certain extent. And then taking a step kind of outside of the legal document itself, one of the things that I've drafted, which I think is extremely beneficial for the sales team, is a guide that was called A Sales Guide to Getting the Deal Done from Legal. And it's a document that took months for me and my team to put together, but goes through exactly how we frame our product from a legal perspective, to what the terms in the agreement say, what they mean, and talking points on how to explain them. So if someone joins the sales team, they've never heard about Wework before, they don't know about co-working or flex workspace, they don't know about membership, they can go to one document and learn everything they would need to learn and educate themselves on how we would speak to something in a negotiation. Because I'm sure all of us as lawyers have been on calls where things come up that we don't know the answer to, and we maybe don't know what they're talking about, or it's an area that we're not comfortable speaking to, and it's not a nice feeling. So if you put yourselves in the shoes of the sales team, it's probably not that nice of a feeling to get on a negotiation or a call and just be like, oh, I don't know, Sophie, do you have an answer? Or Claire, Walter, can you speak to that point? If it's every point. So if we can educate them and give them the tools to learn what the contract says and why it says that, and they can speak to points, they're going to end up being more confident in what they're selling, confident speaking to our product, our terms, why we do things certain ways. And I think that cascades down and throughout the business, where sales team, super smart, they're very impressive, they're great at what they do. They can also speak to any questions that a client might have. And when they need us, we're there to support. But I think it takes time and legal team investment in sales individuals, in resources to create everything, but it's worth the work, I've found.
I would probably just follow that up as well, Sophie, that I think training is really important, and almost so that when the first time a sales team sit down with their counterpart, they already know in their head the legal terms, at least at the back of their head, they know what I'll be asking them, so that they have covered off those points, that they know what they're attempting to achieve, so that you don't have from the word go, they are in the mindset and that you will be in as well. And I think that really helps, because otherwise you just end up backtracking, and no one likes to do that.
If I could build on both of those points, what I did when I went into one software business, where we were licensing the product, is not only did I create a how to successfully work with legal for sales, but I took our base documents, the contractual documents, the statements of work, and the licensing documents, and we color coded the language in the documents so that if we had a guide, got a printed document, if the language was in green print, they could negotiate it. If it was in yellow print, it might impact upon revenue recognition, and they should check with finance and legal. If it was in red print, they were to leave it alone, and if there was a question on it, it needed to come to legal. And then, we can train sales, and we can provide all the knowledge that we can possibly provide, and give them all the rope that they need to hang themselves occasionally. But I found that having that aide memoire in front of them, color-coded, really did assist.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add one quick point on that is, I think typically definitely in my business, you have a smaller group of individuals who deal with very sophisticated clients, and those negotiations will always be the most difficult. And it's usually the same people or same group of people who are working on those deals. So if you take the time to prep with them before negotiation calls and say, okay, according to this color-coded document, right, you can speak to points 1, 2, and 3. I'll speak to point 4. We'll kick it back to you for point 7. Gives them the time to prepare, to ask questions before the call. And when they're on the call, come across like they know exactly what's going on, and they do, because it's their deal and they know the clients. But I think taking that time to really work through, okay, you own this, I'll own this, let's do this together. You create this really kind of great dynamic duo where they can speak to a little bit of legal points. Legal can then speak the same way that sales is speaking, and you can kind of bounce off of each other. And I think that's a great impression to leave on a client. And if you're on the same team, it's great. I hate getting on calls, and I think we've all had, not everyone in the sales team is always an A+ star, and they'll say, you'll kick something over to them and they'll be like, oh, okay, great, but what do you think? And then you're left on the call having to pick up this commercial point that really the lawyer on the call shouldn't be dealing with. So I think the prep really impacts how smoothly a call or negotiation will go.
Absolutely. The prep, along with, setting them up with all the tools that you guys mentioned, is significant in getting that deal done. Are there different ways that you deal with different dynamics in the sales team across different regions? Now that, we're all working in somewhat of a global capacity, whether it's you're selling there or you have a sales team based in different regions, are there different things that are coming up that you're seeing frequently? Claire, I'll kick it off to you.
Yeah, I mean, I finished, it just reminds me of a call I had yesterday where, with our US sales team, and it can sometimes be really hard because the nuances and the way of doing business and the expectations in somewhere like the US may be very different to Europe and the UK. And it is, for me, it is a case of trying to, it's almost like trying to understand a business within a business. So it's like going back to what we were initially talking with and trying to understand their business, but then you're trying to understand their business and the environment in which they work. And actually that can be really tricky. And I'll be really interested to hear what everybody else says, but because you almost are, I find myself relying on them to understand more about how business is done in that country. And I think it is difficult because as well within the UK and Europe, I might have a really trusted network of external lawyers who hopefully I don't need to rely on that often. But when I do, I know them really well. But I do find that in different territories of the world, the method of delivering legal advice can be very different and can be very off-putting to sales teams. So almost whilst it's more important that you can give them the advice rather than putting them in touch with an external counsel who may not deliver the advice in a way that you are comfortable with. Me personally am comfortable with, because you think it's going to put sales off wanting to talk to a lawyer. It's almost like the need is greater there because you don't have that base level of understanding. But I suppose the crux of it is just understanding, going back to this curious point, right, and vulnerability point, and just saying, yeah, so how do you do it in the States? What is normal in the States? What have you seen before? You know, should I be holding fast over this point, or actually is this completely business as usual in the States? It's those kind of questions that I would find myself asking, but I'd be really interested to see, I mean, you know, Sophie and Walter, what you found.
So if I could jump in, I think that giving advice to in-house clients across borders and across language barriers is a real challenge for everyone. And I think that when you're in a business where you have to do that, you have to look for ways to get face-to-face and to build relationships across those boundaries. And the way that I have done it previously in large organizations is most large organizations will have regional or international sales meetings where everybody is brought together because they like to give each other awards, and it's a big party for a week. But during this process, there are also workshops. And so I have spent years making sure that I and my team were invited to these various workshops and various meetings of the sales teams and services teams around different places. I always made sure that my budget, that my travel was budgeted into the sales budget along with everybody else's travel. I always made sure that I had 30 minutes or an hour each day to speak to a different group of people, to understand their concerns and their needs, and then work really closely with and develop as you have, Claire, a really trusted network of external counsel who you can ask discrete questions to. I think I would never turn over the relationship of my counsel to sales, because that's when I generally get huge bills. So I keep charge of that interaction. But I really think it's about understanding culture. It's about understanding barriers. It's about understanding negotiation styles, and that comes with time. And it comes with a lot of hard-won experience as well. And you just have to be willing to be patient and invest the time to learn the differences, between the cultural norms of negotiation. The French, they negotiate in a different way, and they treat legal in a different way than the Chinese do. And you just pick that up over time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I started Wework, my remit was Europe, Israel, Australia, which is a huge, huge area. Lots of different countries, lots of different cultures and styles. And I think it's important for every lawyer, in-house, external sales, every person in a business to understand and really kind of recognize that they're not alone and other people have been in this situation before. So you can leverage relationships, reach out to your networks, reach out to your friends who might have worked cross-jurisdictional, see what their experiences were, what tricks do they have that they could offer, what experience did they have, what were the negotiation styles in that particular country, so that you're not going in blind. Because, even us on this call, I haven't had a negotiation with anyone in France, actually, because we have a French lawyer. But Walter, I could reach out to you and say, what was your experience negotiating with French counsel? And what did that look like? And how can I prepare myself in the right way? Similar to, when I was working on a deal with Israel, and just culturally, they're a little louder on calls. They speak over people. It feels much more aggressive than negotiations I've had with English lawyers in London. And I didn't reach out to anyone before I had that experience. And I was very taken aback to say, what is going on with this deal? Why is everyone so angry? And no one was angry. It was just a different style. And, I wasn't the first person to have a negotiation with Israeli lawyers. And if I had reached out to someone in my network or a friend of a friend to connect me to someone who did, I probably would have found it much easier. So, we're not alone. There are other people who have done it. Let's leverage that experience within the legal community or our company.
Very good point. Along that, same, building off of what you just said, Sophie, are there things that you wish you would have known earlier on in your career to, whether it's leveraging advice or different things that would have helped you build successful relationships?
I could jump in. I think particularly with sales, I think it's key to go in and let them know that you understand the pressure that they're under to close a deal and that you're there to help them. I think it's very easy to, how do I phrase this in the right way? We know sales are demanding. We know that they need us. They have very strict timelines. I think it's easy to go down a road where there's frustration, tension, there's potentially negative talk in the office, XYZ is being unbearable, they won't leave me alone, and it kind of cascades into this whole negative environment that just separates legal and sales. I think our job as leaders and lawyers in the company is to make sure that that doesn't happen and that we're fostering positive relationships in the ways that we were all saying on this call. If someone's being difficult, how can we deal with them in a positive way? And how can we speak about the sales team in a positive way when we are with our team or other people in the business? I think, one of the comments in the chat was, I'm getting ignored, sales are really aggressive. And that's often true, but I think the way that we frame that will really impact how the relationship develops going forward. And it's important to kind of really be mindful of not going down a kind of negative pathway.
I think to add to that, we need to sometimes be reflective and look at ourselves as lawyers and think, are we feeding into this negative cycle in a way that we're unaware? And I think that, there's one thing that as lawyers we're always taught is to look at both sides of a particular argument, to anticipate counter argument. And what we should be doing a lot of the time is looking at what the sales team is up against, looking at their deadlines, looking at their targets, and understanding the pressures that they're under, and being mindful of those. I'm not saying that we have to suffer the fools gladly, because sometimes there are just incredible, unpleasant people that we have forced to work with. But we have to deal with them. It's just a fact of life. But when you understand what's motivating the people that you have to work with, when you understand that, you have the mindset of helping them get to their opportunity and bring it in and bring it home and make a success for the business, they will see that, and they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. And Claire, just before you jump in on this same topic, I think the two biggest tips on this I have for my team and any other lawyers working with sales is, I think having your partner in the sales team is your number one best way to success. Really infiltrate via this one person, and you can leverage that time and time again. And the second one is use that person to inform you of what the real priorities are, so that you can also leverage that information with competing priorities. And you can only do so much in one time because we're only human. It takes time to read documents and it takes time to write them. And what I would say is, what I found really helpful is I'm available when it matters, and I will work around the clock to close a deal if that deal is a priority and it matters. I will not be available if we need to close a deal in 3 months and it's 11 p.m. or it's 7 p.m. and I want to go out for dinner. If it's not a priority, I'm not available. And setting those boundaries is extremely important. But if you're available when it matters, sales will know that you are there when it counts. Otherwise, I'm not here at your beck and call. I have a life, I have my plans, and I found that they actually really respect that. And it's striking that balance is crucial.
Yeah, and probably just a word from me. I think, what would I like to have learned? I think there's probably a couple of things. One is that it's okay not to have all the answers, which I think we've touched on before. My goodness, I look back at when I was a newly qualified lawyer in private practice, and the panic I felt about going into a meeting with a client. My first meeting on my own, I think I went and did an asset register somewhere for an asset sale. I was paranoid that the client, or petrified even, that the client would ask me a question I did not know the answer to. And I look back now, and I was fresh out of law school. I was an NQ. How could I possibly have known the answer to the questions that the partners and the senior associates know? But I didn't know that was okay to say I didn't know. So that's, I think, the first thing. And I think that stays within house. It's okay to not know, the details of every financial element of every transaction. Just ask. And I think the other point is to own your experience. I think legal is a service industry, but we need to own our credibility, own our expertise, and own our time. And I absolutely echo what Sophie said, and that is, set your boundaries and live by them, because people will respect you for it. And it's really important for yourself and for the business, to be perfectly honest. We have got ourselves into this position as lawyers. I don't really know where it came from, but people would say, jump, and we'd say, how high? It's just like, let me do that tomorrow, when it doesn't need to be done tomorrow. And I think that's a reputation we've got ourselves in, and we backed ourselves into a corner, and we can, and we have the power to realign that. That doesn't mean we don't work hard when it needs to happen. We just prioritize stuff like everybody else. And I think when we were talking about this as a group, my final comment was that if your sales team don't respond to anything that we've spoken to here, then I don't think it's really a problem about a demographic between sales and legal. I think it's probably a problem with culture, your human interaction and your culture. Exactly.
I think if I was going to say one thing about prioritization in-house of workload, your best friend has got to be the sales director or the head of sales, because if you've got 50 different salespeople who are all coming in and saying, this is a priority, this is a priority, this is a priority, you don't know as in-house counsel what's the priority. And you have to have a view into the pipeline. You have to have a direct relationship with the head of sales, and you have to go to them. And I have a regular meeting with them every week. And I go and I say, this is what's on my plate. What is your priority for the business? Let's triage this. Because if you try and do everything at the same high priority, you will burn yourself out and you won't enjoy your job, and people will expect that kind of turnaround from you day in, day out, and you'll make a rod for your own back and you'll regret it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all three of you for such an insightful conversation. It's been wonderful. This was our first European event, so please stay tuned to Lawtrades for the next one. We look forward to seeing you all soon.